This week, over 50 world leaders gathered in Jerusalem to mark the 75th year since the liberation of Auschwitz. Present among those leaders were Prince Charles, his first official visit to the state of Israel, Vladimir Putin, Russia, President of Ukraine, Zelensky, who has family in Israel, the President of Poland, gathered together to acknowledge that Jews have a home, and that Jews have a past, and that there is anti-Semitism in the world. I want to focus on that moment of world gathering to highlight a few takeaways. The first is the importance of a Jewish state. 75 years ago and the years before that, we were a people wandering the world, a people without political power, a people that had to ask permission, often granted only on a temporary basis, to live where we lived, and always with the sense that it would be difficult, if not impossible, to protect ourselves if physically attacked. How much has changed in those 75 years since the horror of Auschwitz. I pause to acknowledge the privilege that we will have after Kiddush to hear from Professor Paul Lips, the Community Scholar Programs for the month here in Orange County, who, along with our CBI Enrichment Fund, will enable Professor Lips from Jerusalem to speak about what does it mean to have the word Jewish in Jewish state. Up close, as we will hear, it's pretty complicated how Israel defines its Jewishness. But let us never forget the difference that Israel makes in the lives of Jews, whether in Israel or abroad, in terms of our dignity as a people back in history, a people with the power to defend ourselves, in which world leaders come and gather as leaders of a fellow nation. And so the first important takeaway in terms of 75 years is the blessing of a Jewish state. When Vladimir Putin spoke, the leader of Poland and the leader of Ukraine did not attend for the main event. President Zelensky said we wanted to make the chairs available to Holocaust survivors, which was a diplomatic way, very diplomatic way of saying, I don't want to be there. He didn't want to be there, nor did the president of Poland and others, because of a distinctive reading of history that Vladimir Putin was going to present. Namely, that it was the Soviet Union who fought against fascism at the price of 20 million lives in order to overcome the Nazis. That part is largely true. But for the leaders of those Eastern European countries, it was an incomplete history, because he did not acknowledge the agreement made between Germany and Stalinist Russia to divide up Eastern Europe, that from their perspective is what enabled all the horror to unfold. And so we're reminded that history can be parsed, and one must be very careful in terms of how one looks at the past. In fact, the president of Israel, Reuven Rivlin, aware of the tensions among those world leaders and the prominence for political reasons of Vladimir Putin, who only arrived at the major event when everybody else was seated, highlighting his enormous impact in the Middle East at the moment. Reuven Rivlin, the president, said, "We are not historians. Our role is that of political leaders, which is to look to the future and decide on the future, not on the past." Also politically astute comment. But more, there's a lot of truth to, again, the nature of the past and how one discerns what happens and what matters. That doesn't mean that there aren't better, more complete understandings of the past and incomplete cherry-picking views of the past. And one who looks as a historian must do so with a broad perspective, which leads me to the most important takeaway, and that's the importance of memory as understood in our tradition. That's why they gathered, because the past does matter. To not acknowledge 75 years, to not acknowledge the horrors of the Second World War, to dismiss it, is to live life oblivious to the realities of evil, to live life unaware of the dangers that life provides, even looking forward. History is necessary for identity. It is necessary for reality. It's necessary to be engaged with life. But memory is different than history. History tries to discern what happened moment by moment, and it may include why it happened as well. But memory, as taught in our tradition, is to remember the past in order to discern values that guide us to the future. We are reading about the Exodus story. We will celebrate around our Passover Seders with charoset, as Aaron reminded us. We will taste the past. But we do so as a religious people honoring memory with a distinctive purpose. And that is to learn from the past that as we were able to overcome bondage, as we were able to find the divine presence enabling us to live and move toward responsibility and freedom, so we who are God's partners in this world need to be the vehicle for liberation for all those who suffer. When we think of the Second World War and the horrors that we shared as Jews, we have built more museums than any people at any time. There's hardly a major city in the world in which Jews haven't contributed to building a Holocaust museum. I was in Curitiba, Brazil last month. Curitiba, Brazil. How many of you have heard of Curitiba, Brazil? 2 million people, but only 2 million people, with a Holocaust museum that last year drew 100,000 visitors. Who would know? And the 100,000 visitors were not largely Jews. For that matter, our Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., which draws well over 1 million, maybe 2 million visitors a year, 90% are non-Jews. Why? Why do we build museums of that kind? Because we are a religious people with a memory, our memory, a memory that takes our pain, our suffering, and elevates it to lessons of responsibility, of values that matter in the world, not just for us, but that define what it means to be created in the image of God. That's why we are more than a tribe. Yes, there's a tribal dimension. But those who would see Jewish belonging as only a tribe make us very small as a people. And we were intended as a religious people to be larger. As Abraham Joshua Heschel said, to be fully human, you must be more than human. You can't settle for less. You have to aspire to elevate ourselves from a perspective of the past with a memory that takes out values that lead us toward a better tomorrow for us and for all of God's people. And so this week, what a celebration of Israel's place in the world. And we continue, like with the reading of our Torah today, to have to mine that past, to know what it means to be responsible as a religious people looking to the future. Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, may we be more than just a people. May we indeed be a light that shines light, that enables hope for so many. Amen. Our service continues as Eliezer Mordechai continues to lead page 184.